Welcome back. By early 2021, my house organ project was growing to fill the larger size of its new room. 2 sets of pipes were playable, and 16 were in the room. I had plans to add an additional 7 Wurlitzer ranks on a Wurlitzer main chest as well. At this point, I began rewiring the Kimball keyboards. Prior to this, the console was still using its old cotton-covered keyboard wiring to connect to the solid-state control system. Because the console had not been used for a substantial length of time, I also had to clean the contacts. Specifically, the piston wipers were so dirty that none of them made electrical contact. In April, I purchased a 20-rank Kilgan organ built in 1957. I knew that a complete organ like this would form a larger cohesive ensemble for me to build upon. It also has 2 sets of extremely nice, stable reeds and 4 sets of Haskell bases. From inspection, it appears that most of the flue pipes were originally built by the Este Organ Company in the 1920s, and 2 of the main chests are Este Ventil chests with newer Kilgan primary actions. I'll talk more about this later. The reed pipes, 2 of the 3 pedal ranks, and a few other odds and ends seem to be Kilgan. To prepare for the Kilgan organ, I completely redrew my room plan once again. Basically, the only section of the organ that could stay in the same place was the artiste. I disassembled almost everything else and stored it out of the way for later. I even had to remove the built-in bookshelf that was behind the artiste. This was the only way to fit everything, except for the Este pedal borden, from the Kilgan organ. Here are some images from the disassembly of the Kilgan organ's 2 chambers. Notice the water damage on the back wall of this chamber, the swell chamber. The only components that the water damaged significantly were the Este pedal borden chests, which I chose not to incorporate, and a 5-note offset chest for 5 of the swell diapason bass notes. I'm currently working on refinishing the diapason offset because the wood was warped and the Kilgan paint was peeling. Luckily, the leather seems to be in good shape though. Here are some of the many full pipe trays waiting to be installed at the house. The first component to be installed was the low octave of my new 16-foot open diapason. This stop is full length, which would not have fit in the previous house from part 1 of this series. These 12 pipes are also why I needed to remove the built-in bookcase. They extend almost the entire 8 feet behind the artiste. Next, I cleaned the floor framing and chests from the Kilgan grate chamber and began assembling the structural elements. I did not have to do many modifications to this section of the instrument, except for the 16-foot diapason. Here I assembled and test-fitted the bass offsets for the 16-foot Lieblich Gedeckt and the 2nd octave offset of the pedal diapason. The pedal diapason was built as a 16-foot to 4-foot pedal unit. Because this rank is on unit chests, I decided to make it playable in my grate division as a 2nd open diapason and a double open diapason. Of course, this didn't happen for several months because none of it was playable yet. I decided that I wanted to use the Kilgan swell trumpet as my grate trumpet, so I placed its unit chest behind the main grate frame. It's on the floor. It was lower than the swell main chest in the original installation, and now it needs the extra height for its full-length bass. The 3-rank Kilgan chest in front of that holds an independent 4-foot octave, 2 2/3 foot 12th, and 2-foot 15th. I installed the walkboard, and then this section was ready for pipes. I probably would have waited until all of the framing, including the swell framing, was in place before installing any pipes, but having so many pipe trays lying around the house was cumbersome and in the way. On the Este grate chest, the 4 ranks are a 4-foot flute d'armor, an 8-foot melodia with Haskell basses, an 8-foot Dulciana with Haskell bases that are on an offset chest, and a very full 43 scale 8-foot open diapason. The fact that the SD Great open diapason is so large is one of the reasons I chose to use the pedal diapason unit as a second open. Next, I placed the choir chest, which is the second Artiste main chest, in front of the Great Division. It holds a Chiffy 8-foot through 4-foot Borden, a bright narrow scale 8-foot through 2-foot Principal, and the second molar viola that I intend to use as a Celeste. However, I haven't decided if it would be better to make this one into a Celeste or the one inside the Artiste swell box. They both have full-length 8-foot bases. The viola isn't actually on the chest in these photos because it was rather heavily sugared and needed to be cleaned. The elevated set of pipes in this picture is the trebles of the pedal diapason unit. The relatively large blower that had winded the Kilgan instrument at the church was in the basement, and the wind inlet opening was way too large for my 3/4 horsepower Ventus blower. I made an airtight adapter to fix this, and I have never had any problems with inadequate wind supply, despite the smaller blower. 2 ranks of the Artiste were the only parts of the organ playing at this point, because the rest was either under construction or not wired. To install the Kilgan swell division, I had to modify the floor framing significantly. I wasn't installing the Borden, and many of the offsets had to be fit elsewhere in the room. Here's the SD swell chest, which is the heaviest individual chest in my organ so far. It holds 7 stops, or 9 ranks. You can see the Kilgan toe board for the added mixture at the back of the chest. The swell chest holds a 3-rank plongeau, an 8-foot solicinal with Haskell bases that I didn't install yet, an 8-foot diapason with Haskell bases that I also didn't install yet, an 8-foot oboe with full-length bases on an offset, an 8-foot tenor C Celeste, an 8-foot stop diapason, and a 4-foot harmonic flute. Over the next few months, I added various offsets. In this photo you can see both the bottom of the oboe and the trebles for the Lieblich-Gedeckt. Because there wasn't enough space to leave all of the pipework in trays, I had to begin rewiring the organ in place. I had made sure that, although it is a tight fit, everything is accessible. I wired the 4-rank Great main chest, and in these pictures, I rewired the trumpet unit chest and the 16-foot diapason. In the console, I began wiring more controls. Until now, there were only 5 draw knobs and 1 manual keyboard working. The 8-foot C of the pedal diapason unit was too tall to stand on its chest under the 9-foot ceilings, so I made a small offset platform and tubed it from the chest. I will have to do this for the Great Open diapason bass as well. Since I first got the Artiste in 2015, the swell shade mechanism had never worked. I was tired of this, so I removed all of the Artiste pipes and dismantled the shade engine to diagnose the problem. I found that the shade motor pneumatics were simply leaking an extraordinary amount, although the pneumatic fabric itself was still in good condition. So I glued the pneumatics together properly and made sure they were airtight. When I reinstalled the shade motor, they worked as intended. Here's an improvisation test I did using the pedal diapason unit as a solo voice. Eager for more ranks of playable pipework, and armed with several more driver boards, I rewired the swell main chest. For the swell division to play, however, I first had to rebuild the third blower. This was the only blower I had to rebuild because it had been stored in a damp environment and was extremely rusty when I acquired it. With the blower renewed, I installed the ventil action for the swell division. The stop action of a ventil chest works by cutting off the supply of air to stops that are off. When a note is pressed, pneumatics under every pipe for that note are actuated, but only the ranks that actually have air supplied to them at the time sound. There were numerous ciphers in both SD chests, but their cause eluded me for a time. It turns out that in this chest design, ripped leather causes ciphers, but not only on the ripped note. One ripped pneumatic in the chain causes every pipe of that note to cipher after being pressed. In most cases, turning off the stop and then turning it back on again fixes the ciphers until the note is pressed again. Additionally, some notes cipher when only a few stops are drawn, but not when playing at full organ. This peculiar cipher pattern was quite fun to diagnose, but time-consuming to fix. Luckily though, these chests can be re-leathered one pneumatic at a time while every other stop still functions. Perhaps I will document this process in greater detail in the future. As of now, I have re-leathered all of the problematic notes on the great chest, and the vents for the swell stop action. Here you can see the re-leathered swell vents. These mechanisms open a hole in each stop channel when it is off. This way, if the stop action leaks slightly, pressure does not build up inside the chest and cause stops that are off to ghost or whisper. I had to re-leather this entire mechanism under the swell chest before it could be playable, because the moisture from the water damage in the chamber made the old leather fall to pieces on the outside of the chest. Luckily, it seems that most of the leather on the inside of the chest is still functional. I wasn't happy with the 4-foot harmonic flute on the swell chest, so I replaced it with the Morton Vox Humana. Perhaps I will install a nicer 8-foot harmonic flute on a unit chest somewhere down the line. The wind pressure is only slightly lower than what this particular Vox was voiced on, so it works pretty well. With the acquisition of the Kilgan instrument, my plans for a Wurlitzer division have been put on hold because there isn't enough space. All of the components I had gathered are in storage because I hope to get more space eventually. It is very unlikely that that will happen soon, though. My most recent organ work has been to install a support frame for the 16-foot diapason basses. They had started to lean laterally, a shearing motion, if you like. Of course, this could not continue. Now, the structure is very stable and under no unnecessary strain. That's where the project is today. I've been extremely busy lately, but hopefully I'll have some time to work on it in a couple of weeks. I definitely have some improvements planned for the near future, and I'll document them as they happen. Thanks for watching.